We go live to Cuba as President Miguel Diaz-Canel is holding a press conference. Let's listen. On which we participate as part of the program for the preparation for the defense, and is currently being developed with the participation with the people in this difficult moment that we are experiencing, where we will have the commitment with different activities and also a group of exercises. But we also had the commitment to continue reporting on the population on the current state of the country. Last month we did a press conference as well, updating on the current situation, and there we committed to systematically, in different spaces, to provide information on the matter. After that conference I gave on that occasion, colleagues from the different government authorities, we were broadcasting the information and taking action on that information. On that basis, we were building consensus and confirmation to inform the population. It's been a month approximately from that moment that we especially put the attention on a group of measures and actions that were heightened to face the energy blockade and the scarcity of fuel. We also ratified that there's been 3 months now that not an oil shipment has arrived in our country. We are working in very adverse conditions that has a serious impact that cannot be measured in the livelihood of our people. Therefore, under those conditions, under that situation that we are working, is that we wanted to offer information and adjustments that we had to make to those measures at that moment that come due to the prolongation of the energy blockade and the prolongation of its effects, as we have been for this amount of time without fuel, which is that's the purpose of this encounter. I want to add that the same will have a follow-up. We will not stop on the day of the questions that the journalism can make today, but we're going to continue working on the aspects that we have been dealing today. And we are going to be giving follow-up starting Monday with the presence in different spaces of the vice ministers and ministers and other government officials to broaden in details anything that might be a concern, a doubt, expectations of our population on the issues that have been dealt of our current situation. And we also we will also hold another encounter when time is appropriate, as this one. So we want to welcome all the colleagues from the different media to be here present with us, and we can begin with the questions. We are going to begin with the first question. President of Prensa Latina.
Buenos días, presidente. Muchas gracias de nuevo por este intercambio con la prensa. Acabamos de ver hace unos minutos a través de la televisión cubana.
We just saw minutes ago an address from you in the Cuban television, which is the talks with the U.S. government, and you just announced that a group of exchanges have begun. My question will be, since this has been announced that there are exchanges, is we are talking about a process of dialogue sustained that will be held, which are the topics of that talk agenda in that sense, and the principles for that dialogue with the U.S. government. Interesting question is the information to which the Cuban population awoken today, on which we will continue to with more details. But I think it's very important, first, is that we are reporting at the moment that we are right now in that process. Because on that process, there's been a lot of speculation. And we have, as always, it's been a practice of leadership of the revolution we will not answer to campaigns that seek for manipulation and speculation, and we always report exactly the moments in which we are. These are processes that are done with a lot of discretion, long processes that we must launch them, establishing contacts that there are possibilities of channels for dialogue and there is a will for dialogue. And that takes time. And from that we are building agendas, we begin negotiations and we could reach agreement. That's not happened yet because we are just in the initial phase of that process. And I think that the answer is precisely what we explained yesterday in a meeting with the political bureau and the secretary of the party and the executive committee, where we assessed the current state of relations between Cuba and the United States, and then as a conclusion we reported what today we saw on the news, and there we have the answer to these elements that we have said. Therefore I will ratify this in correspondence with the consistent policy of the Cuban Revolution under the leadership of the Army General as historical leader of our revolution and mine, and in a consensus with the main authorities of the party, the government and Cuban states. Cuban officials held recently talks with representatives of the U.S. government to find through dialogue the possible solution to the bilateral differences that exist between both nations. These exchanges have been favored by international actors, and always that we have been in tense situation with U.S. relationships, there's always efforts to seek channels of dialogue, to seek conversation. It's not the first time that Cuba comes in a conversation with this type. I think the most recent example was the way in which the Army General Raul carry out the conversations with President Obama in a very recent stage. We know the results that came from those negotiations. Well, now, a group of international actors also favor the development of these exchanges. What are the purposes that we are seeking with these talks? The purposes that we have set forth. Well, firstly, to determine what are the bilateral issues that need to be resolved. In second place, what will be the ways to resolve those issues. And thirdly, to determine if there is a will to fulfill actions in benefit of our peoples. This implies that we need to find areas of cooperation through which we can face the threats and guarantee security and peace from both countries, and also guarantee security and peace in our region. As I was explaining before, it has not been and will not be practice of the revolution to respond to misinformation campaigns. This is an issue that is very sensible, that is tackled with the corresponding discretion, with sensibility, and we must act with responsibility and with a lot of seriousness, because it's an issue that impacts the bilateral links. And above this, it carries an important effort to be able to achieve, to be able to move forward in solutions, for which we must also find the construction of spaces for understanding that allow us to move forward with the process, and also to get away from confrontation. In those exchanges we have expressed our will to continue the process under the principles of equality and respect
a los sistemas políticos de ambos países,
for the
a la
political
soberanía,
systems of
a
both,
la
of both countries, to the self-determination to the peoples of both countries, but also taking into account the criteria of reciprocity and international law. That is the moment that we find ourselves right now in regards to the conversations and dialogues with the United States.
Randy Alonso, Ideas Multimedia.
Saludos, presidente.
Greetings, President. Besides this news that is creating a lot of headlines since the information came out a few minutes ago, there's national issues that are also of interest for our people. And I believe that the most urgent has to do with the energy situation. In these days, the blackouts have increased. We have to face a lot of contingency. What practical effects are having in the country? You were talking, there's been 3 months without fuel. So what practical effects it's having the decision of the U.S. government to strengthen the energy blockade against the country? How are we facing this? What are the alternatives that we have to be able to curb that heighten, that increase in blackouts and the impact it has on all Cuban society? I would say this is the issue that most discomfort is creating in our people right now. And it has to do, I insist, with the energy blockade, with the strengthening of the energy situation that has put forth that blockade. It is a situation for which we have been preparing beforehand, and on that we explain a whole group of proposals of actions and measures that we are developing in the current times. Let's talk what has changed from the moment I explained in my previous press conference to now in relation to this situation, as you said, has aggravated in the last 2 weeks especially. Well, in first place, it's been 3 months without an entry of fuel to the country. Therefore, we are generating power during the day with national crude oil and our thermoelectrics. And besides, the support of renewable sources, which is considerable, which in this time is being between 49 and 50%, independence also of the conditions, and also another thing that we have to explain, the instability of the national system, that energy from the photovoltaic parks to regulate frequencies and avoid blackouts, which is a new element that was introduced in these last 2 weeks, and is something I will explain later. And Energas is also part of the accompanying gas of the extraction of our crude oil. And at night, we are only generating with thermoelectrics and Energas. Now, additionally to this, before last week, we had certain disponibility of diesel and fuel that we were using them in 2 main establishments, which are the engines for the distribution engines in MOA and a system of engine that we have in Mariel. 3 months without fuel, that diesel ran out and the deposit ran out. Therefore, there is a considerable number of megawatts that are no longer available, especially for which we were using for the most important hour at night, and puts the system in a situation of a lot of instability. Look, we had managed to maintain in January, February, blackouts that were not greater than the ones from December. We had managed to establish an effective measure to regulate the blackouts. It doesn't mean that there were no blackouts. There were blackouts, but not of the magnitude that we had in the last 2 weeks. Despite these 2 distribution engines that went out of service, that is the only 2 that we were able to use until now.
que no hemos podido emplear en todo
we
este
have not
tiempo
been
por la
able
falta
to
de
use them
combustible, por las
all this time
consecuencias
due
de
to
lo
the
que
lack of fuel, due to that energy blockade. If we had fuel, we would have in the nighttime 1,400 megawatts more of generation that would bring us out of that heightened hour. There was a deficit of 500, 600, 700 megawatts, but we could close
pudiéramos cerrar las madrugadas y las afectaciones
the
fueran
night,
mucho menores
and
que
the
las que
impact will
tenemos
be
en este
way less than the
este
ones that we have right
Al
now.
salir estas
Since these
dos
two distribution centers,
plantas de generación distribuida, el sistema se vuelve muy inestable.
the system becomes
Y hay un día
very
en que ocurre una
unstable,
salida
and there is a
brusca
day
de la
there was an
Por
abrupt
lo
exit
tanto,
of the
las
Gitera thermoelectric. Therefore, the
provoca esa
oscillation
salida de
that
produjeron el blackout.
occurred brought about the
Cuando vamos
disconnection of the
recuperando
energy
el
system.
blackout, hace falta combustible
To return from the blackout situation, we need fuel in the energy islands to be able to give signals, to be able to turn on the thermoelectrics, to be able to synchronize them, and also synchronize the photovoltaic parks.
mínimos de combustibles que
So we need also a minimum amount of fuel,
en los
for that.
emplazamientos y que
And
estaban
it was
previstos
used,
para situaciones
and we already used them because it was foreseen to be used in this kind of occasion. So we overcame that disconnection without counting with Giteras, but we are right now in a situation of instability. For example, today in recent days in Havana, a substation went out and it provided a lot of circuits to go blackout. And people ask, how come they cannot regulate this? And it's just something that we cannot be foreseen because we see it's elements that go out without previous warning, and then we have to act quickly and create oscillations and instability in the system. And amidst all that wave of adversity and complexity is that situation is happening, and we must act on those situations. So in a situation of instability like this, we cannot take advantage during the day, all the power, all the energy that is being generated by the photovoltaic parks, because we have to regulate because we must regulate frequencies of the energy system to avoid another disconnection. So those are the reasons why the deficits right now is different from the deficit that we handle in other times. In regards to this, the impact is huge, and it can be seen. And it can be seen, of course, in these issues of energy. We have had whole municipalities out, and the issues not only in Havana. In the provinces, we've had circuits with more than 30 hours of blackouts. That creates a situation of anger, of discomfort, of anguish among the population, because it impacts in everything. It impacts water supply. So two things that are very vital in a household, in a family, in the livelihood of family, acting at the same time. It also impacts also in the vitality of the production services as well, and also to provide services to the population. Impacts in communications as well, because radio bases also run out of energy. Impacts also in the service, in the health services, in education, in transportation, and we can see how this impacts across all systems and infrastructures of the daily life of Cubans. Now, I can tell you that nothing is being turned off here because we want to bother someone. We are doing the impossible. I cannot describe. I can only say from the sentiment and respect. I have no words to describe the efforts that our workers of the electric union are doing, which are titans, because they do those efforts. They go above the adversity, but they also have the problems at home with their families, and in many times when they have 30 hours, 40 hours of blackouts in one of their communities, affecting one of their families, they have been working for more than 40 hours without rest in a thermoelectric or in a photovoltaic park, or seeking solutions to this issue, and therefore, and I don't question in the issues of not understanding the discomfort, but I do regret that there are people that are experiencing this discomfort, which is legitimate, it's true, it's real, that their answer is to curse the revolution, to curse the government, to curse the institution, the electric institution, because the fault is not of the revolution, the fault is not of the government, the fault is not of our energy system. Revolution, government, workers are doing a great effort to overcome what is impossible. The fault is of the energy blockade that has been imposed on us. And I would ask, what capacity would have other countries that have made a blockade like this one, that's been for more than 3 months, who would have capacity to have the levels of electric generation that we have maintained, that have only been possible for using a very rational use, I would say creative, innovator of the national crude oil, from which we're opening new perspective, and from another part, all the investment that with an extraordinary effort amid this blockade, we are making an investment that is making a change in the energy metrics. That is visible, because as I was explaining the other day, if we didn't have the 1,000 megawatts of solar power that we had in this time, what would be happening in the day? And we have been jumping from blackout to blackout. The impact would be greater. And those are the reasons that explain the differences of what has happened in the last weeks. We are talking about that reality, of that complexity, but I want also to talk about what we are doing. Understanding that everything doesn't have an immediate solution, but there are solutions. Actually, there are solutions right now, but what happens is that the magnitude of the problem is so great that the solutions are not visible. And I have some data here. I want to stop in a topic so that you understand the perversity that exists, the evil that exists with this energy blockade. Right now in this country, there are tens of thousands of people waiting for a surgical operation that cannot be done due to the lack of energy. But in those tens of thousands, there is an important part of children that are waiting for a surgical operation and cannot be done due to the impact of the energy blockade and due to the impact it has on our health system. And however the country lives, a failed state. A failed state cannot face all this situation. A failed state cannot seek to resolve and how to move forward. I don't remember if it was yesterday or before, an article that was published in Cuba Debate of a journalist recognizing the complexity, but was also talking about the beautiful things that were happening at the same time in this country every day. Children going to school, the way a patient is cared for in a hospital with a complex disease, the effort we are following every month, the work of the provinces. We are not doing the second report of what has happened in the provinces and how the provinces have developed their strategies. Colleagues, the amount of solutions that have been found, the way that life is being organized for bread, to provide services and offers of food, in the way that with all these limitations we are working in the Cuban field to produce more food, the way that transportation has been organized for the people of health, the way that the school year is taking place, both in the middle school, elementary school, and also in higher education, but also
en mi
with
país.
cultural spectacles of the highest level. Those are our realities.
Las expresiones de
Those
que
are
nosotros
also the expressions
tenemos un
that
pueblo
we
que actúa con
have a people that
resistencia
acts with resistance,
creativa, que eso nos mantiene unidos,
that
que en esa unidad también
keeps us
hay una
united,
potencialidad tremenda
and in that unity
para
there's an important
enfrentar
powerhouse
esta situación.
to face this
Entonces, voy
situation.
a hablar de lo realizado.
So I will
De lo realizado,
talk what we have
lo que
done.
voy a explicar en los datos que
I will
voy a
explain the
dar,
data I will
que no-
give.
con los que no quiero aburrir, pero son datos
I don't want to
que
bore you with this data,
más que todo
but
muestran
these data show
la continuidad
the continuity
que le damos a lo que ya
that we have
habíamos
given
explicado
to what we had
anteriormente,
already
porque son los
explained
resultados
previously,
prácticamente
but
de
it's
un solo
the
mes.
results of a single
Entonces,
month.
también saquemos la cuenta,
So
si
we
un mes
must
hemos avanzado
take
de
this
este
into
cuánto
account.
más,
If in a
iremos
month we
avanzando
were able to advance
en el
this
resto
far,
de los-
how
de
much
los meses,
can
y
we advance in the
permítanme
coming month? Allow
que
me
vaya
to
algunos datos.
to read some data here.
Bueno, crece la explotación
Well,
de nuevos pozos para incrementar
The
la
exploitation
producción
of new
nacional de
oil has
petróleo
grown to use
y de gas
for the national production of oil and accompanying gas. And in the two first months of the year, we overachieved the plans of oil production, and with that, we were able to stop a tendency that was happening in the country, that we closed the year 2025 decreasing and not fulfilling the plans of production of gas and oil.
nacional. Esto es muy importante. Recuerden
This is
que
very
uno de los
important.
enfoques
We
energéticos
must
vimos que
recall
tenemos
that
que
one of the main focus for the energy is that we must learn how to live from our own sources, and those sources are that national crude oil and that accompanying gas.
tendremos más crudo para explotar nuestras
With more national crude oil, we will have more to use in our thermoelectric, and this is taking part as part of the recovery of capacity generation in thermoelectrics. Maybe today, over the weekend, we were able to incorporate a new thermoelectric in the system, which is one of the units in Cienfuegos, in Céspede, which are over 100 megawatts. But it's not only to recover the thermoelectric, but we must have national crude oil to be able to use it. And all these measures will allow us to have the capacity to have the fuel to generate that power. And with the accompanying gas, we must recall that we had fulfilled to grow in 25,000 consumers of manufactured gas in Havana City, and that's already been implemented. And there is a new service that in a month has been habilitated. We already built 4 tanks of the basis of the super tankers. Remember what happened after that fire that happened in a situation, and we needed tanks to be able to store fuel. We recovered, in what has gone from here, we have recovered 185 megawatts of power generation. As I was saying, solar parks are generating among 49 and 51% of energy during the day. Now, there are over 529 new clients of manufactured gas in Havana, of the over 20,000 foreseen, of which we will have in just 1 month. This is not just get there. We must remember, we must go there. We must put all the installation, all the pipe work to be able to deliver to a home that gas. We were able to make sure that almost all bakeries in the country that were identified that could transform for the type of energy to use for the production has been done, and this has been done to ensure bread. We have installed 955 photovoltaic systems in isolated houses and social centers that provide service to attention to the people in different municipalities. For example, yesterday, when we made the analysis with some provinces, there are provinces that have covered a whole municipality, all their polyclinics. All their polyclinics work with solar power, social centers, and that's a reality. Aside from a number of houses that are isolated, to which were given this service. So we are talking about polyclinics, elderly homes, communication stations to be able to sustain, to maintain communications, funerary homes, and other centers. 120 children with diseases that require constant air conditioners in their homes already have the solar power that guarantees in their homes 24 hours power, and now we are doing another census that the health ministry is doing to extend the service to more families. If you remember, we talked that there was a group of workers, especially in sectors of health and education, to which we were going to install 10,000 modules. Well, 10,034 modules have been installed. Those people already are receiving that benefit. In the next weeks, we're going to incorporate new capacities in the solar parks. We have finished new parks that are pending to all the technical assistance from the providers. They are already finished. As soon as the technical assistance gives the validity of the park, they will be introduced to the national system. So I want to highlight the following. There is a project that comprises the installation. It's not a photovoltaic park. It's the installation of battery stations of 50 megawatts in accumulation of energy. This is an energy. This accumulation is to regulate frequency. So what we are doing today with the solar parks, these battery stations would help that, so we could take better advantage of the solar parks and the national electrical system would be more stable. We are already charging. We are already electrically charging 8 of the 16 containers that complete that project. Therefore, the first 25 megawatts of accumulation of battery for regulate frequency, we will have them available in the coming days. And we are going to continue working the other 8 containers to complete the 50 megawatts that will help to regulate frequency and will avoid the disconnection of the national electric system. So we have 4 new solar parks of 21 megawatts each, so it's roughly 85 megawatts more. And there is another 3 parks of a total of 15. 15 as a whole will provide as a whole 85 in total, but the first 3 parts of that project will be concluded and they will provide 15 more. So we are talking before March end, we will be incorporating more than 100 megawatts to the national electric system with renewable sources. So we established a group of differentiated treatment that stimulates the investment in homes of renewable energies, and also for the state sector as well, both in residential and in the projects of businesses. And these actions, these measures that have been taken, have 3 main aspects. The first one is taxes. So we excluded from tax payment all these imports. Also, is using a preferential tariff of payment for the national electrical system of these people that have this installed, to all, if they can provide, or someone that makes an investment to generate energy for the national electrical system. And the other one is a group of taxes that take a differentiated treatment for those that provide, those that install, those that provide service to these renewable sources. Well, in a first census that is still not complete, that we're going to update every day, there are over 2,247 private entities. We are talking about private businesses that have renewable sources to develop their activity. There are over 900 state companies that have solar power to carry out its activities. There are over 6,700 houses connected to the national electrical system through solar power.
Hay 636
There's 636
a la población, estos son sobre todo en acueductos de comunidades. Hay 462
power stations, solar power
bomberos
stations for
para
communities.
riego en
Also,
agricultura, y a la misma
there are
vez se están
hundreds
haciendo inversiones
that are being used
en la
for
rama de la-
agriculture,
de la
and
hidroeléctrica
investments are
y
also
de
being made in hydroelectric
eólica, y
power
posiblemente
and
cuando termine el año nosotros
air
tendremos
power.
un parque eólico.
During the year, we will have in Las Tunas, we'll be recovering
En los
air
parques
generation in the
de-
different parks there,
de Jibara, y también
in the parks of Jibara,
estaremos
and
conectando
also
nuevas-
we'll be connecting
hidroeléctricas.
new hydroelectric plants.
En el área de la transportación
In the area of
eléctrica,
transportation,
estamos,
of electric
potenciando
transportation,
la-
now we are
la
encouraging
movilidad eléctrica y la creación de eléctricos.
transportation through
Solidera.
electric
En
powers.
el país hay más de 2.665 vehículos eléctricos.
Well, there are over 2,000 electric
Hay
vehicles
más
in
de
the country.
21.600 motorinas
There are over
eléctricas. Muchas de estas
21,000 electric
particulares
motorbikes, many of which
las formas no
are,
estatales las han
are
puesto
private.
a disposición de servicios para la población ante los gobiernos locales.
Many have
en un
put
grupo de territorio.
their bikes
Ya
at the
hay más de
disposition
49
of government
estaciones de
authorities to provide service to the population.
Para esto-
There,
para
there are
este
several
Y lo que estamos planteando
charge-
es que cada
charge stations for
parque
these
automotor que
for these
funcione con energía
vehicles.
eléctrica no se conecta al sistema electroenergético para cargarse, sino que tenga
And these
la
parks do not
posibilidad
connect to
de
the
ir
national electrical systems,
a una
but they have
electrosoldadera que funciona con
the
energía
capacity
solar y, por lo
to
tanto, no es
connect
carga
directly to solar power generation. Therefore, it's not an
La-
extra charge for the national system.
para el sistema electroenergético. Ayer el primer ministro, bueno, quiero
Yesterday,
explicar que
first
también
minister.
con
Well,
nosotros están compartiendo
I want to
este
explain
encuentro
that
que va
with
para
us, we
miembros
also
del
have
político,
different members
el
of the
primer
political
ministro
bureau. The
Marrero,
first minister,
el
Prime Minister
miembro del bureau
Marrero,
político,
members of the political bureau,
Ojeda,
Ojeda,
nuestros ministros de las Fuerzas
our
Armadas
ministers of the armed
Revolucionarias,
forces,
el Ministerio del Interior, nuestro
Interior
canciller,
Ministry, our
y
foreign
también un
minister,
grupo de compañeros,
and also a
los
group
primeros
of
ministros
colleagues,
y miembros del
vice
del
ministers, and
comité
members
ejecutivo
of the
del
executive
Consejo de Ministros, que son
that
varios de los compañeros que
several
van a
of the
dar
colleagues that
explicación,
will give
dándole continuidad a todos
explanation,
estos temas.
giving following
La
up
próxima
to
semana
all
junto a un
these
grupo de-
issues next week,
de ministros.
along with another
Bueno,
group
Marrero
of
ayer
ministers.
me
Marrero yesterday
me compartió una información que no la voy a
share
dar
an
completa,
information I will
pero,
not
por
give
ejemplo, se ha hecho una
completely.
en 400 autos eléctricos.
There's been an
de los cuales
investment
estarán
in
arribando
400
los días, los-
electric
los
vehicles,
próximos
which will
días,
be
los
arriving
próximos
in the
aproximadamente.
coming
Lo
days,
vamos a dedicar al traslado de
that we will
pacientes con
dedicate it
hemodiálisis en
to
todos los
for the
lugares del
transportation
país.
of
Por lo tanto,
hemodialysis
estaremos
patients
implementando
across the
un
country.
servicio tan
So we
sensible
will be
a la
we will
población
making
como la hemodiálisis
sovereign
de la
a a vital service
de
as it is the
combustible-
hemodialysis
de combustible.
patients
Por supuesto,
away from
estos
fossil
vehículos
fuels. Of course, these vehicles, these electric vehicles that will be used for those services will have also
ayudar también
time
a otros
available
servicios.
to help as well in other health
Ahora que hablo
services.
de estas cosas que
Now that I
tienen que
speak
ver
of
con la
these
sensibilidad
things
de
that
la
also
gestión
have to
del
do with the
gobierno,
sensibility
de la
of the
población,
management of government
qué extraña
on the issues of the
dictadura
people,
somos.
what a
En medio de
weird
esta
dictatorship
situación
we
estamos
are,
preocupados
that amid this situation,
porque los pacientes
we are
con hemodiálisis
concerned
tengan una
that the
solución, porque los
hemodialysis
policlínicos
patients
tengan una
have a
solución, porque los
solution,
servicios básicos
have a
a la
basic
población
services, that the
tengan
population has basic
una
services.
También se van a incorporar 150
We are also
triciclos
going to incorporate
y
350
15 microbuses para
electric
transporte
bicycles
de pasajeros. Esto se
and
adiciona. Ustedes saben
minibuses
que sistemáticamente
to,
estos
for the
meses se han
transport
ido
of
incorporando
passengers.
este
You know
tipo de
that in
medios de
this month we
transporte
have been
en varias
incorporating
provincias. Pero aquí
these
quiero
means of
aclarar
transportation
acá,
across
estos son
provinces.
equipos que se
I want to
compran los
highlight
componentes,
something.
pero los ensamblamos en el país. Por lo
These
tanto,
are equipment that the
es lo que
components are bought
aportamos a los servicios de la
abroad,
población, pero es un desarrollo
but
que va teniendo también
are
nuestra-
assembled here in the country. So
nuestra industria. En la medida que
it
avancemos,
also helps the
estaremos
development of an industry.
más componentes de
I will be
fabricación nacional
incorporating
y
more
menos
components
de
of national
importaciones,
production
varias nuevas
in the coming
posibilidades,
month,
más diseños
and this
ciudadanos.
opens
La
more
industria
possibilities.
militar está
We have
apostando en ello,
Cuban
también
designs, the military
el
industries
Ministerio de
giving
Industria.
supporting
Y
this, and also
34
the industry
furgones
ministry.
eléctricos para cargas. O sea que resumiendo, sin querer
So
adelantar,
summarizing,
con
without
más-
boring you with the
con más
details,
datos,
with more
se
details,
confirma que estamos trabajando en
we
varios
can
frentes
confirm that we're working
para
on different
enfrentar
fronts to
la
face
situación
the situation,
energética,
the energy
para dar
situation,
solución
to
al
give
complejo
solution
escenario que vimos. Todos demandan inversiones financieras.
that they
que hay que
all
hacer en medio de la
require
conflicto, por lo tanto,
financial
tenemos que
investment that we
estar
must do
evaluando qué
amid this
entra,
complexity.
dónde lo ponemos,
So we must
en
be
qué
assessing
magnitud
what comes in,
lo
where do we
podemos
put it,
poner, pero todo eso,
in
como
what
explicaba,
dimension.
si
But
hablamos
as
del
we have
proyecto
explained, if we speak
demuestra que se ha
what
emprendido
we
de
have
manera
done
acelerada
in a month, it
y
shows
prioritaria.
that we have
Aunque
been
la
working
situación es compleja
quickly and with priority. And the situation is complex. It will not solve quickly, but it will be solved with the passing of time. And we have not renounced at any moment our sovereign demand to have oil supply. Right now we need fuel, we need oil to provide more vitality to all the processes of national life.
Joel García, director del periódico Trabajador.
Bueno, buenos días, presidente. Bueno,
tengo pendiente una visita a tu medio.
Sí, estamos ahí esperando. Bueno, la pregunta está relacionada.
Well, the question is related to, especially,
Usted explicaba toda la situación de la energía, del combustible.
what our paper speaks about. You were speaking about the energy. There are many companies that have had to stop working. Some have taken the measure to reduce personnel. And even though the Cuban legislation protects workers, the question is what more could be done by businessmen to face this situation, taking into account the situation could continue to be tense. I will complement the answer to your question. What is the role that unions have to play to support everything that you were saying? Well, once more we go, and I will have to repeat myself, we go back to the impact of the energy blockade and its impact on the life of our people in the productive sphere. Production has been reduced. Without power, not a single country can produce in the dimensions that are required. So also the possibilities of services are reduced, and all that also implied to create adjustments. There are changes of work, there are different levels of stoppage in workers' actions, and all that creates impacts in the work and also in the income, which is the most important of our workers, of our families. A clear principle that we must all share from the government management, from the political activity of the party, the union action, and the management, is that we must defend the protection of work and the protection of the income of our workers. And I've been insisting, and I've shared this with the colleagues of the workers' movement, with provinces as well. We must insist that more than a stoppage, we must try to seek a relocation in terms of work, because there's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do in the communities. In the same communities, there are processes that are necessary to attain. There is necessary that they reach another level of solution, that having that workforce in that scenario, that there are not other factors, there are different workplaces, but more with their communities to organize communal projects or move forward with the ones that already exist. We can improve the communal production of food, the recollection of waste, projective projects in function of the population in accordance with the amount of professionals that have training, and with their knowledge they can support the educational projects that today are concentrated in the communities. It's a lot that can be done. And it's better that even though we have to change for our work, we continue to provide, we can to support. We should not wait for someone else to do what we can do. Our work legislation foresees a group of special treatment. For example, in the budget units during the first month, for those that did not have a relocation, they get their full salary, their full income in that first month, and then after the second month they get 60%. But those are processes that are done in short time, and is taken on by the budget of the state. So these are protection that can be used by the budget
Pero en el ámbito
units.
empresarial
But in the
tenemos
business
tres fuentes.
sector, we have three aspects that can help in this. But I don't think they are always used.
Total dominio, y sin embargo fueron fuentes que utilizamos en la COVID.
Maybe people don't know much of them, but we use them during COVID, for example. One of them is the reserve for contingency that companies create that can be used in these cases. The other one is the reserve not used, which are reserves that the businesses create from their own
Con sus utilidades, que también
incomes,
puede ser
that something that they generated with their own production that can also be used for this. And the third fund is the fund of compensation that exists
en estas empresas. Yo
in
creo
these
que si
companies.
articulamos
And I believe that if we articulate what the budget can provide and what these three
modalidades que tienen
funds
las
can
empresas,
also
podemos
provide
entonces
within companies, we can
un
achieve
justo, un
a
adecuado
fair,
tratamiento
adequate
laboral y
treatment,
salarial
work
a los
treatment
trabajadores
for
en la
incomes of
actual
workers in the current
Y
conditions.
entonces yo diría, con ese mismo sentido,
So I would
que
say
la
with
gente
that same
busca
sense that
que
today
nuestro
people,
pueblo, que
that are
nuestros
people,
trabajadores
are workers,
están más tiempo en
are
otros
more time
escenarios
in
de
other
labor que no son
scenarios
los
of work that are
tradicionales,
not the
el
traditional.
sindicato tiene
The union,
que actualizarse
unions
en su
must
función.
update on
El
their function.
sindicato hoy tiene que estar más que en la fábrica,
Unions today have to
en
be
esos espacios donde
more
están reubicados
in those
sus
spaces more than where their workers
El
are
sindicato
than
tiene
in
que
the
estar
factory.
atendiendo y defendiendo
The union must be attending and
esa-
defending
ese tratamiento
that
laboral y
work
salarial,
treatment and income treatment
con voluntad
with will
de solución en esos
to
espacios
find solutions in those
donde van a
spaces
estar más los
where
trabajadores.
workers
Y
are
yo
going
insisto
to be.
mucho en el ámbito
And I insist a lot in the community level. If we take advantage of that
que
workforce,
además son vecinos,
that
y
also are
hay
neighbors
empatía, hay
among,
una posibilidad
there is a
en la
relationship,
solución de problemas que tenemos
an
en la
empathy,
local, en la
and
comunidad,
the
en el
solution, the
municipio,
possibility that we have
dar un salto
in the
importante
locality, in
en
the municipalities
de
for production.
actividades
I believe that we
en
can
medio de la
find
situación tan
lots of
complicada que
activities
tenemos.
to
No
do
tenemos a nadie
amidst the
parado, no
complex
tenemos a nadie
situation that we have.
movilizado,
We have no
tenemos
one stopped, we have
inmovilizado, no
nothing,
tenemos a nadie
no
que
one
sin estar dando
is
un apoyo
without
a nuestra sociedad. Y eso
giving
tiene esa
some
participación.
kind of support to the society. And that's a step forward, and that capacity
Y en la unidad
will
está la
generate
razón de
unity.
todos nuestros-
And in unity
de todas
is the
nuestras
reason for
victorias,
all
de
our
todo lo que podemos
victories,
avanzar
all
en
everything
todos
that we
los
have
campos.
achieved.
Pero lleva un análisis
But this takes an analysis,
exhaustivo, un análisis comprometido, un
a thorough
análisis
analysis,
responsable
a responsible
con los
analysis
que dirigen las entidades presupuestadas,
with those
con los
that
que dirigen las
lead
empresas,
the companies, the budgeted units,
por el movimiento
and also
sindical.
the union movement.
Raciel Guanche, Juventud Rebelde.
Saludos, presidente. Las universidades cubanas en medio de este contexto también han tenido que
Greetings, President.
transformarse, ¿no?
Cuban universities also amid this context had to transform to be able to complete the school year. There were students also in relation to the topic, also to conclude what is the semester. My question is if from the leadership of the country this issue has been spoken about and what is planned to do about it.
Muy presente en estos
It's something
días
that has been very present in these days
en las redes sociales.
in social media.
Vuelvo de nuevo a las causas
I go again to the causes of the issue.
impacto del bloqueo energético
Impact of the energy
en
blockade
nuestro sistema
on our
educacional,
education
tanto en la
system,
educación general
both in general education and in
en la educación
university education as well.
superior. ¿Cómo funciona un centro escolar? ¿Cómo
How
funciona
does
una
a
universidad?
school center, a university will work with blackout, without fuel for the transportation of professors and students, with deficits of food,
Sin poder desplegar todas
without
las
being able to
flexibilidades,
deploy
los procesos de
all
aprendizaje, enseñanza,
the
aprendizaje,
potentialities
nos
that
proporciona el uso
our education
de las
system
tecnologías de la
provides.
información. Todo eso lo afecta
All
este
that
bloqueo energético.
impacts, all this is impacted
Ahora,
by
¿qué
the
vamos a
energy
hacer?
blockade.
Rendirnos, parar el
So
curso
what are we
escolar,
going to do? Surrender,
no
to
dar
stop the school year,
alternativas, no dar soluciones.
not give alternative,
Yo
not
creo
give
que de
solution?
manera
Well,
muy creativa,
I believe that in a very
tanto el
creative
Ministerio
way, both
de
the
Educación
education minister
el
and
Ministerio de Educación
the
Superior
Ministry of Higher Education
tomaron un grupo de medidas
took a group
cuando
of
el
measures
ministro Marrero
when
convocó
Prime Minister Marrero
al gobierno a un
called
grupo de acciones
on the government to a group of actions to
en un
face
primer mes,
in a first month
todas las limitaciones que
all
íbamos
the
a tener
limitations
por
that we were
deficit
going
de
to have
combustible,
due to the deficit of
y
fuel,
hubo que reorientar
and we had to
el diseño
redirect the
curricular
design the school
de
year,
la
the school
actividad
curriculum,
tanto en la educación general
both
como
in general
en la
education
educación superior.
and in higher
En
education.
el caso de la educación superior,
In the
se
case of
tomó
higher
una variante
education,
de semipresencialidad que no son
there
nuevas,
was
porque
a-
incluso nosotros tenemos
a
cursos que en tiempo
variant
normal,
that-
como son los cursos para trabajadores, trabajan en
that it was
condiciones de semipresencialidad.
both press
Yo diría
that
que
was
lo
from
creativo
school,
del uso de esta
from home,
semipresencialidad es
and
que se
it already
volcó
exists.
a un escenario comunitario y lo empato con
The
la
thing is
respuesta
that
con
we
relación
must
a los obreros.
turn it
Como
to
en el
a
escenario comunitario
communal sector, to a
poder
communal scenario, and we must
trabajar
link this
también
with the
desde el punto de
workers.
vista
Also, we must link
educador.
this
Y aquí
also
también tiene que
to
ver
work
mucho
from the communities in terms of
cómo se
education.
insertan
And we
los
must
estudiantes en la
also
comunidad, cómo
work on
se
how we
continúa el
insert
curso
students
desde
in
la
the
comunidad.
community.
Eso
How
es
do we
solo el papel
continue
del
the school from the community? It's
Y también el
it's not only the
sacrificio
role of the
del
students, but
estudiante tiene que ver
and the
mucho
sacrifice and
también
efforts
con
of the
los
students, but
profesores.
also have to do with
Con los
professors,
porque los profesores entonces tienen que
with
ir
teachers,
a la
because
comunidad,
also
tienen que
because then
atender
teachers
de
have to
manera
go to
directa
that community. They have to
al
deal
estudiante
in a more
que
direct
se
manner with those
transforma en la
students.
relación
So relations,
profesor-estudiante que hay en un
teacher,
aula con
student,
un
is
escenario
relationship
que es
is
el
transformed,
escenario que es el
which is not
centro
the same
de
in
la
a
comunidad,
schoolroom,
que es
which is in the community,
el centro universitario municipal, o que son las aulas o las
or which are
instalaciones que en la comunidad se ponen a disposición.
the spaces that are
de
put
lo-
at the
de lo
disposition in the communities
Y en
for
ese
students.
sentido se ha trabajado.
And in that sense, we have
Llevamos
worked.
un mes en esa
We have been
situación.
a month
Todo no
in
ha
that
sido
situation. Things
Hay
have not
lugares
gone
donde ha
out
funcionado
correctly.
mejor.
There are places where that work
Y hay
better,
lugares
and
donde
there
han
are
sentido
places
lagunas,
where
no
there's
ha habido
been
toda la atención
doubts.
directa
There's not been
y
enough
eficiente.
attention. It
Y
has
ha
not been
provocado
efficient, and it
preocupaciones
has
en profesores,
triggered concerns on
estudiantes y en
teachers,
familias
students, and in families,
cubanas,
on
también
Cuban
en el
families,
ámbito de los
in
de
the
los
aspect
profesores y en el ámbito de
of the
los
teachers and students.
¿Y qué se ha hecho?
And what has been done?
Evaluar,
Discuss,
dialogar,
assess,
atender
dialogue,
preocupaciones, atender quejas, atender insatisfacciones, y
attend
oír
to the
propuestas,
satisfactions,
escuchar
hear
propuestas
proposals,
que están haciendo tanto profesores
because
como
we are listening to proposals that both
como
students and
también,
professors are making,
familiares.
as well as proposals that are being
A
made from
insistir más en
families.
buscar qué potencialidades hay
We
en cada
must
comunidad. Todas
to
las
find
comunidades no son iguales.
what can be done in each
cada
community, because
comunidad,
all
en cada
communities are
municipio,
not the
para
same
poder
in
apoyar
every
estos
municipality to
procesos
be
de
able to
reorganización.
support this process of
Y en
reorganization.
virtud de eso,
And in
tanto el
virtue of
Ministerio de
that,
Educación como el
the
Ministerio de
Education
Educación
Ministry
Superior
and the
se han
Higher
actualizado
Education Ministry
la-
have
las
updated
medidas, las
the
acciones
measures, the
que está
actions
encabezando
that are
el
being
gobierno
led
del país.
by the
Y la
government of the
próxima
country.
semana, para
And
dar
next
más
week,
detalles, para
to
llegar
provide
a
more
los detalles
details,
organizativos,
next
para
week
entrar
to
en
have
más
more
detalles
details in
sobre
terms of
esta
organization on this transformation
transformación y todo lo que se
and everything
ha planteado
that has been
rectificar a partir de la
proposed
discusión y
to
el debate que
rectify coming from the
que ha
debate
existido.
that has existed.
Lo van a informar la ministra de Educación,
The Education
el ministro de
Ministry and the
Educación,
Education,
por
the Higher Education Ministry
la semana
will
que viene.
specify
Para que
this
vean, además, un
in
día,
the coming
una
week,
fecha tan
next week.
histórica en Cuba, como hoy 13 de marzo,
And I want to
lo que
emphasize
significa
something
para el
more
movimiento
so important as a date
estudiantil
today,
cubano, para el movimiento
March
universitario, que en
13th,
aquella fecha,
what
en medio de la
represents
dictadura,
for the Cuban student movement in that date amid the dictatorship rule, supporting the movement of 26th of July and standing next to the cause of the Cuban people, and heroically
la Federación Estudiantil
the
Universitaria, el director
University
estudiantil,
Federation of Students
eh,
did that.
creo que confirmar esto
I think that to confirm this in this moment means that for the Cuban Revolution and in a process of socialist construction, education and higher education are priorities.
y las vamos a seguir manteniendo
And we are going
como
to
una
continue to maintain it
prioridad.
as a
Y estos son
priority.
momentos
And these are moments,
temporales que nos imponen el cerco
temporal
energético,
moments
pero en
that are
en cuanto haya
imposed
condiciones
by the energy blockade. But as soon as there are conditions to overcome the situation, we return to the classroom, we return to develop the processes with all the education experience that is a referent for the world, our education system and higher education system.
Valia Martínez, Cuba Visión Internacional.
Buenos días, presidente.
Buenos días.
En este diálogo que
In
usted
this
tiene hoy
dialogue
con la
that you
prensa,
held
nos
with the
gustaría
press today,
particularizar en un
we would
tema
like
y
to
es el papel de
speak
los connacionales
particularly
en el exterior.
on
Y yo creo que en
an
este
issue which
complejo
is the
escenario
role
también han
of
jugado un papel
co-national
relevante.
abroad,
Mi pregunta
and I believe that they have
concreta
played
es,
an
¿qué
important
papel
part.
reconoce el gobierno
What
cubano
role
en esta
recognizes the government,
tanto en el
the
apoyo
Cuban government
económico a sus
in this
familias,
community
como
from
la
the
defensa de
economic
una visión
support
más
of their
objetiva
families and
sobre
defense of a
frente a
more
campañas mediáticas
dialogue
y políticas
relationship
que
with
buscan
Cuba
aislar el
in the
país?
face
Gracias.
of a
Interesante
campaign that seeks to isolate the country.
En la comparecencia
Interesting
anterior, cuando
question.
hablamos de las
I recall
transformaciones
that in the previous
que-
press conference
que
when we
es
talk
necesario
about the
impulsar
transformation, which
en
are
nuestro modelo
necessary
económico
to,
social, planteamos
promote
esta-
now in our
este
new
campo, este ámbito.
economic social model. We propose this change also as one of the most important with Cubans residing abroad.
Bueno, hay que decir,
Well, we must say,
hay que explicar esto desde
we
el
must
momento
explain
de
this from the current times.
indudablemente la cifra de cubanos
The number of Cubans
residentes en el
that
exterior
live abroad
o que prolongan su
or
estancia
that stay
en el exterior
long times abroad
en estos momentos
right
ha sido
now
creciente,
has grown.
es numeroso. Y por lo tanto es nuestra
And therefore,
responsabilidad como
it is
gobierno
our responsibility as a government
acogerlos,
to
escucharlos
welcome them, to listen to them,
atenderlos
to attend them,
y propiciarles que tengan un espacio de participación
and
en el
to
desarrollo
provide
económico
them
y social de nuestro
a
país.
space
A
for
partir de
to
su
participate in the
disposición
development
a
of our
hacerlo,
country.
de su disposición
Coming
a
from their
participar
disposition, their will
a
to
partir
do
de
it,
sus
to
posibilidades
participate and their possibilities.
de participación. ¿Qué distingue a la mayor parte de
What
esta
distinguishes
comunidad
most
cubana
part
que
of
reside
that
en el exterior o que
Cuban community that lives abroad or that for a time
radican en el
has lived abroad?
Bueno, muchos de ellos
Well,
son
many of them
profesionales o
are
técnicos,
professionals.
son un
Many of them
componente fundamental de
are
la
a
fuerza de trabajo
main
organizada
component
que ha formado
of the
la
qualified
revolución.
workforce that our revolution has trained with our education system.
Son personas que mantienen su
There are
arraigo
people that
cultural,
keep
su identidad
their Cuban
con la
identity,
cultura y con la nación
their Cuban nationality, and
cubana.
their ties with our
Son
island.
personas que mantienen una
People
relación con la
that
patria
keep
en
a
momentos
relationship
difíciles
with the
como
homeland
estamos
in
viviendo
difficult moments
ahora.
like this that we are
De
living.
ellos ha llegado expresión solidaria,
From them we
expresión
have
de apoyo,
received
expresión de
solidarity,
denuncia
support. They have
ante
condemned
las presiones ante las políticas
the pressures and
que tratan de
the
condenar
coercive policies that try to
nuestro
suffocate our people.
y el vínculo con esos
And the
cubanos
link with
residentes
those
en el exterior
Cubans
no es
living
nuevo.
abroad
Recuerde
is
que
not new.
Fidel en el
We must
comandante
recall that
en el año
Commander-in-Chief
78
Fidel,
inició
in the year
un proceso de diálogo
1978, he began a
con
process
la
of
comunidad
dialogue
cubana residente
with
en el
the
exterior.
Cuban community living
Yo
abroad.
tengo lo he dicho en otra oportunidad, lo dije en el último
In
encuentro
other
que
occasions, in
participamos
opportunity,
con la
I said it
comunidad
in the previous press
cubana, creo que
conference.
fue hace 2 años más o menos, aquí
It
en
was
La
like
Habana.
over 2 years
Yo
ago.
siempre guardo en mi memoria de joven
I always keep in my memory as a young man
aquel encuentro de Fidel
that
con-
encounter of
con
Fidel
los Maceitos,
with
con la brigada Antonio Maceo, cuando
with the
vino a
unit
Cuba.
Antonio
Está
Maceo when
reflejado
they
en un
came to Cuba,
documental hermosísimo.
which can be seen in a
Hay
beautiful
varios
documentary.
momentos de dirigentes de la
There are
revolución,
very different moments people of
reunidos con ellos,
revolution
pero está ese último
met with them,
encuentro de Fidel
but there is also
con
that
ellos
last
cuando
encounter
ya
of Fidel with them when
a
they are
tomar el
about
avión
to
y Fidel
go
le
to
dice,
get
"Con
on the
usted la
plane.
patria ha crecido".
And Fidel tells them, with you the homeland has grown.
Y a eso se remonta esa voluntad de vínculo
And we
y
go
de
back to
diálogo y
that,
de participación
our
con esa
will
comunidad,
for dialogue
eh,
with that community
residente en el exterior.
that
Después
lives
eso ha
abroad.
tenido,
After that, there has
en
been,
el transcurso de estos años,
in the passing of the
momentos
years,
importantes
there have
como
been
las
important
4
moments.
ediciones que ha tenido
The first
la
edition
Conferencia
that
Nación
conference,
y la inmigración,
Nation
que
and
ha
Immigration
sacado
has had,
incluso hasta
that we have
cambiarle
proposed also
el
to
nombre,
change the
porque no se
name
ven como emigrantes,
because
sino como
we don't
parte
see them as
de-
immigrants.
de
We
la
see them
nación.
as part of the
Hay que
nation.
decir que los principales dirigentes
We
de la
must say that the
revolución,
main
las
leaders of
visitas
the
de
revolution
trabajo que
in
han
the work
realizado
visits that they have
en
made
los últimos
in the
tiempos
last times
diferentes países,
to
siempre
different countries,
buscamos un espacio
we always seek
para
a
reunirnos
space to
con
meet
los cubanos que residen en
with
esos
Cubans
países, para
residing in those
escucharlos,
countries to
para
listen to them,
compartir con
to
ellos
share with
lo
them
que se está viviendo, incluso
what's been
para que ellos
experienced,
planteen
so that also they
sus propuestas
pro-
y su-
they
sus
make their
preocupaciones.
proposals and they state their concerns.
En el último año había una
In the
actividad
last year,
intensa
there was an intense
través de la
activity,
dirección
and
del
through
Ministerio
the
de
direction
Relaciones
of the
Exteriores
Foreign
y a
Ministry
través del Ministerio de
and
Comercio
through the
Exterior,
Ministry of Foreign
que
Commerce
atienden, a los cubanos residentes en el exterior.
that
Ha existido mucho
care
vínculo,
for the
han producido
Cubans
varios
living
encuentros
abroad. There's been a
en
lot of links.
países,
We
en
have
varios
seen a
países
lot of
por zonas,
encounters in
por
different
regiones
countries, in different regions,
del mundo donde ellos han planteado
where they have
y han explicado
made proposals and they have explained concerns,
aspiraciones,
aspirations,
han hecho propuestas y han planteado lo que ellos consideran trabas
and they have proposed what they consider obstacles to be able to provide more to the country. And with all that, we made a dossier
de todas esas
of all those proposals
formulaciones.
and concerns.
Hay que decir también que
We must also
se han
say
hecho encuentros sectoriales.
that
Por
we
ejemplo,
make
se
sectorial
desarrolla un
meetings.
evento de
For example,
pedagogía en el país
we make we make an event of teaching in the country, and they come here as part, and we make an encounter, a teaching encounter with Cubans residing abroad. There is an industrial event, and with Cubans of that sector, we do that as well, that encounter with Cubans living abroad. And also, that also provides more information. Recently, with processing of the results of all those encounters, we have made an analysis in the Political Bureau and the government of the country, and I believe that with the new measures, the new actions that are going to be made known, I believe that it resolves almost completely the statements, the concerns and proposals that Cubans living abroad have made, and it eases a lot their participation and presence in the development program of the country. Those measures, those actions, those reflections that we have made, and all that will be implemented. The Vice Minister Oscar, who is also as Minister of Foreign Commerce, on Monday, I don't know if it's going to be in the round table or in another space, he will explain in detail everything that have been done in regards to what you were asking in relations to Cubans living abroad. But I believe that we have built a platform that will allow for a more active participation, less loaded with bureaucracy, and more flexible, and with new aspects that I will not say now. I will let Oscar explain it on Monday. Oscar, so you must have this on your schedule, because you're not going, if you had another date, you must now do it on Monday.
Buenos días, presidente, a usted y a todos los que nos acompañan en esta comparecencia de prensa. A pesar del escenario tan complicado,
despite the so complex scenario to isolate our country, in the last time we have received solidarity aid, and we continue to receive it. And I would like to know what's the strategy of the Cuban government to distribute those resources and the mechanism of control to ensure that they arrive to the foreseen destination. Well, let's talk about current times and of antecedents of history. Right now, we are receiving donations, and especially from a very friendly, brotherly country that has shown to be which is Mexico, led by President Claudia Sheinbaum, which has had a strong firmness in the defense of Cuba, and we respect and we welcome and we admire her even more, and well, other countries. And also, as an important element of current time, is that as around these right-wing forces are angered, and they begin to intoxicate the use, especially right-wing media. They try to articulate with a with an alleged mismanagement of Cuba, trying to attack the governments, the countries that help us in that way. The ethic of the revolution is so great, and there is an experience that shows an indestructible ethic in how we tackle the donations, how we distribute them, that crushes any media campaign that tries to intoxicate the process. And the people has this very clear, because the people is the one that receive all those donations that are received by friendly countries and solidarity organizations. So let's talk about history. There's a long history, a long experience of the way we, international organizations, cooperation projects, institutions, solidarity organizations with Cuba, governments, friend governments of solidarity, they make donations to the country in a wide variety of modalities. But the country also has well-organized a planning system of distribution, of control, and a great experience as well in how we process these donations. We get donations of all types in different circumstances. We get emergency donations in situations as complex as the one that we are living right now, but we also receive donations in moments of emergency, like when hurricanes or a determined natural catastrophe. We receive donations out of will of friends of solidarity that want to help in certain, for their commitment that they make. They come and visit Cuba, and they visit a place and they see a sector, a specific sector, a health center, a school, and they decide to donate. They come as part of cooperation project that we have with determined international organization, also as part of the work that we develop with important agencies as the World Food Program and the United Nations Fund for Development. What do we take into account when we receive the donation? The first thing that we respect is the purpose of the donation on behalf of the donor. If the donor says, I want these notebooks to reach those schools, those notebooks go to that school. If the donor donated equipment of water pumping for a community, it goes to that community. There are other donors that they do not state a purpose. So I bring these system purposes for polyclinics of the country. What does the country do? It analyzes where are the greatest needs and proposes the donor. We propose that we prioritize with this donation these polyclinics in the country, and we fulfill with the objective of that donation. So in that way we are acting. And there are others that are way more general that send things and allow us to, with our own criteria, with priorities which are usually led to vulnerable sectors, to different institutions, for example, for the homes of children that have no family, for the homes of elderly people, for the health and education center. We distribute it in that way. What is given to the population, for example, in terms of food, has never been charged, and is almost, and is usually used through the ration book, but without charging for them. We announce with a lot of transparency where donations are heading. If there is a food, we put it down on the ration book. There is a constance at the family level that so much was given in a donation. There is in the registry of consumers. Social workers participate actively in the delivery of donations in the communities. And there is a whole system of auditing from the prosecutor, from the controller's office, so that there is full transparency and not a single drop of doubt. And tell me what case of mismanagement of donations can be spoken of in Cuba. You can look for a whole history of Cuba who can document an corruption act in the face of a donation at the level of the state. Many of these institutions that participate with us, they have representation in Cuba, and those representatives, which are very active, they constantly visit the places to which the donations are headed, and they check the destination of those donations. And they have always shown great satisfaction for the seriousness with which it is worked in that sense. And also embassies, the representation of other countries in their embassies here, when we receive donations through several different government projects, institutional projects, embassies also visit those places and observe on the ground, and they receive all the information that has to do with that donation. Also, we always encourage that when there is a visit of someone from a country that has to do with some of the donation, we propose among the program of visit to visit the place to which there was a donation, to which it was implicated. So there is a transparency, a total transparency. In this case, which is more recent, through the TV and media, it's been also at the bodegas where arrived for the Cuban families. The Mexican embassy has been there visiting the different places and has been part of all this checking of the destination of those donations. They took the picture of a Mexican product. We have commercial relationship with Mexico that are not donations. We have Mexican products, but that they very quickly it's intoxication because it's based on lies and deceit, and they are looking for the fifth leg of the cat, as we say here in Cuba, to discredit, to disturb, to disunite, to confuse the Cuban people. But I tell you this, the ethic with which the Cuban Revolution works, with which our government works, that ethic of the nation is very strong and can face any intoxication attempt.
Lady María Labrador de Gran.
Sí, gracias. Buenos días. Saludos para usted, presidente, y también para todos los que nos acompañan. Bueno, hace unos días atrás se dio a conocer en el país un hecho que realmente llamó la atención, no solo a lo interno, sino también fuera de nuestra frontera, que fue el intento de infiltración terrorista que aconteció acá en nuestro territorio. Un tema que también, como usted ha comentado, fue objeto de toda una campaña de intoxicación y demás, pero que bueno, oportunamente se dieron a conocer todos los elementos. Nos gustaría que usted comentara un poco en qué punto están hoy las investigaciones sobre este hecho, y bueno, sería interesante saber también si existe una colaboración entre Cuba y Estados Unidos para esclarecer este tipo de hechos.
Te voy a contestar y también te voy a dar una...
I will answer, and I will also give you a personal vision
que tiene que ver también con los sentimientos
that I have also with the
y los
sentiments
valores
and the values
de nuestros combatientes.
of our combatants.
Bueno, el hecho en sí
Well, the
es
fact
tal como se ha reflejado, una
is,
infiltración
as it has been
armada
reflected,
con
the
fines
incident,
terroristas,
an armed infiltration with terrorist
una
aims,
infiltración
an incursion
financiada y organizada
financed and
desde
organized
el territorio de los
from
Estados
U.S.
Unidos,
territory,
como se presentó en la
as
denuncia
was
en
presented
la
in the
televisión,
complaint
venían
in the
fuertemente
television.
armados.
They came heavily
Por lo
armed.
tanto, eso demuestra sus intenciones
Therefore, this shows
y
their
rompe la
intention
falacia con que algunos
and breaks
personeros de la derecha contrarrevolucionaria
the lie with which
cubana
some of the
en los
right-wing
Estados Unidos
sectors
quisieron decir que venían a buscar
in
familias.
Cuba say that they came to look for family members. With the amount of weaponry that they were carrying on the vessel, no one else could fit in that vessel. And second, who comes to look for their families with assault rifles, with bombs, and with all the military equipment that they had? They must think that we are idiots, that we are fools. They think that they can confuse a whole people with so many lies and so much deceit. And their intention was to assault military units and social centers, to create confusion, to create distrust, to sow fear. And it was an attempt of aggression. We have established a penal process with all the guarantees of due process. For those detained had the opportunity, their family members were very quickly informed, and the family members have had all the contacts with them. Those injured have had all the health attention, all the health care. They have welcomed the health care, and also the family members were able to interact with them. For those that perished, we also contacted with the family members. The family members recognized the bodies, and they have been implicated in all the process that has to do with the transportation of their bodies
no se ha ejecutado de disposición familiar. Pero muy importante,
But it's very
en la
important.
investigación,
In the investigations,
todos han
all
reconocido su
have
participación,
recognized their participation.
todos han reconocido
All
que
have
dispararon,
recognized that they fired,
y fueron ellos los primeros que
and they
dispararon
were the first to fire
contra nuestra
against
embarcación de guardacosta,
our Coast Guard
el
vessels.
servicio de guardafrontera. Han aportado detalles
They have
interesantes
provided
que se
very
van dando a
interesting
conocer
details
a
that
la
will
misma
be
medida que
made
siguen
known
avanzando las
as
investigaciones,
the investigation continues.
de quién los reclutó, quién
Who
los
recruited
preparó,
them,
quién
who
los
prepared them,
organizó,
who organized
dónde
them,
hicieron su
where
entrenamiento,
they
quién
trained,
los financió,
who financed them,
y han dado los nombres de
and they
las
have given the
personas, de los
names
lugares, de
of the
las
people, the
intenciones, de lo que
places,
se
the
propusieron,
intentions, what they were proposed,
de lo que se pretendía.
of what they pretended to do.
Dos de los detenidos
Two of the detained
están incluidos,
are
están
included
declarados en la lista nacional
in the national
de
list
personas y
of
entidades
people and entities
designadas como terroristas
designated as
en
terrorists
nuestro país y han
that our
sido
country
circuladas
has,
también
and
a
they has been also
instituciones internacionales.
provided to international institutions.
Y por supuesto, oportunamente
And of course,
se le brindó información de esto
information of this was given
de Estados Unidos.
to our counterpart
La
in the
contraparte
US.
de Estados Unidos
The US
han estado
counterpart
informadas,
has been informed,
han agradecido
has
la
welcomed
información
the
que se le ha dado,
information that
han
was provided,
planteado por
have
vía
provided through
consular,
the
¿no?
consul,
El
through
término
consular is the term,
vía diplomática consular,
through
han
diplomatic means, through consular
planteado su
means,
disposición
they
de participar de
pre-
conjunto
they presented
en el
their
esclarecimiento
will
de los
to
hechos.
participate
Y estamos a la espera
in
de una
finding
posible
the
visita
facts,
ya anunciada, ¿no?
and we are
de expertos del FBI para
and we are
participar
awaiting
en
the
el
arrival of a very
esclarecimiento,
likely
la
visit of
investigación
experts of the
con
FBI to
el-
participate in the
nuestras fuerzas del
investigation
Ministerio
with
del-
our forces
Interior.
of the Interior
Por lo
Ministry.
tanto, sí hay una,
So,
hay una información,
There
hay
is,
una cooperación.
there is a cooperation,
en
there is
con
an
la
exchange of
contraparte
information
norteamericana
with
y
our
hay-
US
y
counterparts,
estamos a la espera
and
de
we
una
are
visita de un
waiting
grupo de
of a visit of a group of
del FBI
experts
para
of the
seguir
FBI
avanzando
to
en
continue
esta-
moving forward
en esta investigación.
in this investigation.
A los 2 días
2 days
de producirse la
after
infiltración,
the incursion taking
junto
place,
con el ministro del Interior,
together with the Interior Ministry,
compañero Lázaro, visitamos
we visited
en la institución de salud donde se está
the
atendiendo
health center
al comandante de la nave Cuba.
where the commander of the Cuban vessel is being treated.
Un hombre joven,
A
formado
young man trained
por nuestra revolución en los órganos
by our
del
revolution,
Ministerio del Interior, con una larga trayectoria.
in the institutions of the Interior Ministry
en
with
la
a
propia
long
Guardia Frontera. Lo conocí
experience
anteriormente porque es de Villa Clara,
in
es de
Coast Guards.
Corralillo.
I had met him before because he's from Villa Clara, as I am.
Nosotros no quisimos ir desde el primer momento.
We didn't
no
want to go
hicimos
from the
público
very
ese
first
encuentro,
moment. We
porque
did not
estábamos
make that
visitando por
encounter public
solidaridad, por
because we were
compañerismo,
visiting
por-
out of solidarity,
por apoyo a un
out of
combatiente
partnership,
que
in
está herido.
support of a
Queríamos
combatant that was
hacer de
injured.
eso
We
un
didn't want to
acto
bother and to
mediático.
make of that something for the media.
Y vamos a visitar a una persona herida
We went to visit
la
an
metralla
injured
de un-
person
de un
with a
invasor que
shrapnel
venía que
of an
venían
investor
dispuestos a matar.
that came willing to kill.
compañeros, ese hombre, su familia, su madre, su esposa.
That
Son de
man,
una familia
his
muy
family, his
humilde.
wife, his mother,
Su mamá es
a very
médico,
humble family.
doctora, su
Her,
esposa es
his
maestra.
mother is a doctor, right? And his wife is a teacher.
Se desbordaba en explicarnos, no su herida ni su dolencia, el cumplimiento del deber.
They continue to explain not their
Y
pain,
uno trataba
not
de
the injury,
preguntarle cómo te sientes,
but
te
the
duele.
fulfillment of their duty.
el
One tried,
cumplimiento del deber.
one tried to ask how you were you feeling,
Y
are
nos
you in
narró
pain,
cómo
and
fue
they would
herido,
only
cómo
answer
se mantuvo
that they
al timón,
fulfilled
al mando de la nave,
their
y
duty,
cuando ya la fuerza
and
no
how
le
he
alcanzaba,
kept on the helm
le
of
pidió a
the
uno de sus
of the
compañeros
vessel,
que tomara
and when he had no longer
el
strength,
mando de la
he
operación,
asked one
se
of
tuvo
his
que acostar,
colleagues
sangrando totalmente,
to take over
debilitado,
the command of the operation.
y oía todo el desarrollo, y un orgullo tremendo por haber frustrado
And it was a great pride, and had a great pride for being able to thwart that incursion, to be able to prevent the Cuban people a source of pain if those people managed to disembark and fulfill their purpose. And these things, because there are many lessons that we can find in this country in this difficult time. The one for our 32 colleagues, combatants in Venezuela.
La de estos 5 combatientes del
of
Ministerio
the
del
ones of
Interior de
these
las
5
Fuerzas
combatants of the
Fronteras
Coast Guard
concluir una infiltración que los duplicaba
that stopped an incursion
en
that
personas
doubled
para
them
no hablar de
in
lo que
number, and we don't
de
need to
manera
speak
multiplicada
in how much
su
multiply the difference in
armamento.
weaponship was,
su armamento y del orgullo
and the pride
de este oficial cubano
of this
por el
Cuban official
cumplimiento del
for the
deber
fulfillment of the duty
y su compromiso con el
and their
pueblo,
commitment
su
with the
valor,
people,
su honestidad
his honesty, his
y-
valor,
y su comportamiento cubano, cubanísimo,
and his Cuban behavior
que se va por encima de
that is above
cualquier
any
otra
other
conducta y
any
otro,
other conduct.
comportamiento. Esas son de las cosas también que fortalecen convicción,
Those are also the things that strengthen conviction,
que nos enaltecen en tiempos
that strengthen us
tan duros
in these difficult times.
y aprovecho para compartirlo.
And I take this opportunity to share it because it's a sentiment that Lázaro and I have, that we live it there in first person. And I believe it is good for people to know this, how our people are. Because our people has faces, they have names, they have families, they have history.
Y ojalá un día, en algún momento,
And hopefully one day, when we are fully
cuando se
recovered,
entienda, la prensa también puede hacer un trabajo de,
the
pero
press
sobre
can
todo
also
de
make a
historia
work
de
out of this, but
compañeros
of
que están bien,
life story of
una
a colleague like
expresión,
him
un
is
ejemplo
also
de
an
lo que se
expression
multiplica
of what's
en
multiplied
número de combatientes
in
de las
thousands of
Fuerzas
combatants
Armadas
of our
y
armed
del
forces
Ministerio
and the Interior Ministry.
del Interior. Y bueno, también ya que
Well,
estamos hablando
since
de
we are speaking
infiltraciones y
about
planes
incursions and enemy plans,
han sido detenidos también, como se
we also
anunciaron,
detain,
10
as we
ciudadanos
announced, a Panamanian
que también
citizen
están siendo
that is also
procesados
being processed
con un proceso con todas las garantías
with all guarantees
para él mismo, que han
for
tenido contacto
of
con
due
sus
process.
familiares y
He
que
has
han
had
tenido
contact
atención
with
consular,
family,
una visita
and
del
he's also
embajador
had a
de
consular
Panamá
attention, a
en
visit
Cuba,
of
que está
the
en marcha,
Panamanian ambassador in Cuba,
una investigación donde también han
and an
reconocido
investigation is ongoing,
su culpabilidad
where
y
he
también
also
han dado
recognized
información de
his
quién los
culpability and
reclutó,
also
bajo qué
provided information on
circunstancias,
who
con qué
recruited him,
propósitos,
who
en los
provide,
lugares,
what circumstances,
han
the
dado los
places, the
nombres de las
names
personas, y todo
of the
eso también
people behind,
está en investigación
and
y
all that is
forma
also
parte de la
being
denuncia
investigated is part of
que
the
se está
complaint
haciendo alrededor
that is
de
being
ese
made
tema.
around that topic.
Bueno, usted hablaba del 13 de marzo, aquí está Radio Reloj también, que tiene un día histórico, Joan Eduardo, en representación de la emisora Radio Reloj.
Buenos días, presidente. El
Good
gobierno
morning,
de Ecuador,
President.
recientemente
The
declaró a
Ecuadorian
los
government
personal
recently
de
declared the
nuestra embajada en ese
personnel
país
of the embassy
no grato.
non grata, persona non
Una
grata.
cumbre que a las claras busca
A
revivir
summit
la
that
política
is
de
very
Estados
clear
Unidos
that
y la
thinks to
OEA
revive the policy of the
para
OAS and the
lograr
United
el
States
aislamiento de Cuba.
to carry
Mi
out
pregunta
the
es, ¿cuál es la
isolation of
posición
Cuba.
del gobierno
My question is, what is the position of the revolutionary government to face, in the face of this new aggression of the U.S. government?
Gracias. A ver, vamos a evaluar el contexto.
Let's go over the context. Something that distinguished Cuba before the war. What distinguished Cuba before the war? What does Cuba offers to the world? A broad link, active, friendship, of cooperation and solidarity. That's what marks Cuban relationship with the world. We are a country that has diplomatic relationships with most countries in the world. But also, it's a broad link of people to people with friends across the world. Cuba has cooperated with the development of countries through programs, with government programs, where Cubans have been developing missions of the highest recognition of the role they have played, and there we have all the history of our medical missions, of builders, of construction workers. The same way, the places where we fought out of the request of government, especially in Africa, the recognition to Cuba of our combatants, our officials. Therefore, I would say there is a sense of what distinguishes Cuba is precisely those virtues, those values that trigger admiration towards Cuba, not rejection. That's the sentiment that dominates the majority of those relations. Of course, in Latin America and the Caribbean, the great homeland, our America,
Esos vínculos son más fuertes,
those
son
links
más
are
íntimos,
stronger,
son más cercanos,
are closer.
tienen que ver con toda la
They have
historia
to do with the history
de cada uno de nuestros países,
of
con
each
todas
of
las
our
relaciones.
country,
Ahí en la
of
historia,
our
yo recuerdo cuando
relations.
estuvimos en
I
México
remember
en
when we
México
were in Mexico
por el grito de Dolores, cómo
for the
tanto López
cry of
Obrador,
Dolores,
el presidente, como yo, cuando hicimos nuestras palabras,
both Lopez Obrador,
había
then
una
president,
cantidad de hechos que
and I,
enlazaban
there were so many facts that
a
intertwine
nuestros países,
our
a México y a
nations,
Cuba. Por eso se
Mexico
puede
and
hablar
Cuba.
de Angola, eso
That's
se puede
why
hablar de las
we
misiones
can talk about
internacionalistas, eso se puede
Angola
hablar
international
en cualquier
missions.
lugar
We
del
can
mundo.
talk about it in
De
any
eso
part of the
hablan
world.
con dolor los hondureños que han quedado ahora desatendidos
Hondurans are
porque
speaking
su
of
gobierno
this
retiró la brigada
out of
médica
pain
de Honduras,
because their new government
o de
expelled
países caribeños que ahora van a quedar
the health
sin la
brigade
atención de los
from that
médicos
country.
cubanos que reconocen
Caribbean
que es vital para el
nations
sistema
that are
salud.
now going to be left without the attention of
La
Cuban doctors,
presencia de
and they recognize that
personal
it's
de la salud
vital the presence of the Cuban
Cuba.
doctors.
Ahora, en la historia también hay que
Now, in
reconocer que
history, we
los
must also
gobiernos de Estados
recognize
Unidos, desde que
that the
triunfó
U.S.
la
government,
revolución
since the
cubana,
revolution
los
triumphed,
gobiernos, han sido todos los gobiernos,
and I say the governments because it's been all the
han
governments,
insistido mucho en tratar de
insisted
aislar
a lot to try to isolate
a
Cuba.
nuestro país. Y recordemos los primeros
And we
años de la
must recall the
revolución,
first
la
years of
enorme
revolution,
campaña que hubo.
the great campaign.
Recuérdense lo que los
We must
sucesos de
recall
la OEA, y
what happened in the
recuérdense cómo
OAS,
México
and we must recall how Mexico
mantuvo con dignidad
kept with
las
dignity
relaciones con nuestro país.
relationships with our
Parece que la
country.
historia se repite.
It seems that history repeats itself.
Se vuelve a tejer una campaña
They,
de
they,
aislamiento
they
de Cuba,
weave again a campaign of
Y hay
isolation
quienes no se
towards
doblegan.
Cuba,
y vuelve el México solidario y hermano
and Mexico
al lado
comes again,
de
the brotherly Mexico comes again, stands again side to side to Cuba.
y otro elemento que es de valorativo.
Another element that is
No
truly
es lo
of
mismo las
value
relaciones entre gobiernos que las
is not the
relaciones entre
same
pueblos.
with the relationship between government and the relationship between
Puede haber un
peoples.
gobierno como este que
There
se
can be a
menciona
government
en el
like this that is mentioned in the question
que sucumbe ante a las presiones que le hacen
that submits to
Otro gobierno.
pressures made by other
y
governments,
que por tener un gesto
and that for having
que es
a
un gesto de
gesture,
lacaísmo,
a
si
gesture
la palabra es correcta, la
as,
expulsión de la mención de
as a lackey,
sin ninguna justificación,
without any
sin ningún
justification,
argumento
without any
legal,
argument,
todo
without
derecho
any proof,
internacional,
and against all
convenciones de
international
Viena,
law, all Geneva Conventions.
pero la amistad entre el pueblo
But the
cubano y el
friendship
pueblo
between the
ecuatoriano
Ecuadorian
es histórica
and
y es
Cuban people
indestructible,
is
como es
historical and
indestructible la
indestructible,
relación entre el pueblo
as it
cubano
is
y los pueblos de América
indestructible the
Latina y el
relationship
Caribe.
between Cuban people and the peoples of Latin America and the
Y
Caribbean.
esa no la puede destruir la decisión de ningún gobierno.
And that relationship cannot be destroyed by the decision of any
Y los
government.
pueblos saben de qué
And the
lado
peoples
están.
know on which side the truth is.
Por lo tanto, va a seguir existiendo
Therefore,
una relación
relationship
entrañable
between
entre los
Ecuador,
ecuatorianos y los cubanos.
between Ecuadorians
Y
and
más
Cubans are
temprano
going
que
to
tarde,
continue existing,
esa
and sooner
relación
than later,
se recompone.
those relationships will be restored.
Recuérdese, nosotros tenemos que participar en el Día de la Defensa.
Bueno,
I
si
recall
no
that
hay
we
una
must take
pregunta
part in the
más,
Day of the
queda
Defense.
Radio
But
Rebelde.
there's only one question
Jesús
left.
Mato.
Muy buenos días, presidente. En la jornada de ayer, el
Yesterday,
Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores
Foreign
publicaba una
Ministry
nota que
published
decía,
a
en el espíritu de buena
statement
voluntad, de
saying
estrechas
in the
y fluidas
spirit of
relaciones
goodwill
entre el Estado cubano
between
y
the
el
Cuban
Vaticano,
state and the
el gobierno
Vatican,
de Cuba ha
the
decidido
Cuban government
liberar
has
en los
decided to
próximos
release
días
in the
a
next, in the
51
coming days,
personas
51
sancionadas a privación de
people
libertad. ¿Qué nos
that were
puede
sentenced to
comentar al
prison.
respecto?
What can you
Sabemos que
tell
se
us
trata de
about
una
it?
práctica,
We know
habitual
this is
en nuestro
a
sistema de
visual
justicia
practice
penal.
in our
Debía
justice
contestarla,
system.
Bruno. Es una práctica
Bruno should be the
soberana,
one to answer
nadie nos la
this.
impone.
This is a sovereign
La
practice.
decidimos nosotros
No one
soberanamente, no es
imposes
única,
on
lo
it.
hemos hecho en
This is
otros
decided by us. This is not
Incluso
unique.
la
We
nota
have
se
done
da
it in other times.
datos de,
We
de
provide
momentos en que hemos
data of the
acudido a
moments that we have
a
in that
esa
statement. We provided data
práctica.
on when we have also used that
Eh,
practice.
Es soberana.
It
la
is
hacemos
sovereign.
en este
We do it
momento
in
por
this
las-
moment
por las
due
explicaciones que se
for
dan
the explanations that are
en
given
la
there
nota,
in the
y
statement,
sencillamente responde
and
a
it
nuestra
simply
vocación,
responds to our vocation,
humanística, a la-
our
a la
humanistic
manera en que la
vocation,
revolución
and the way the
trata con
revolution
justicia. Caso, fíjese,
treats
está
with
reconociendo
justice,
que son personas que han mantenido una
recognizing
buena
these are
conducta y
people that
nosotros
have
reconocemos,
kept a good conduct,
nuestra-
and we recognize
en nuestras normas
in
legales
our
los
legal
beneficios
norms the benefits
a las personas que
to the people
cumplen sanción
that
por determinada
fulfill their
por
sanctions
determinada conducta.
with determined
Como
conduct.
siempre,
As
prepárese
always,
ahora,
You must prepare because now there's going to come the media intoxication. They're going to find links with our facts, the distortion of reality. But we have taken this sovereign decision. It's there. So now I propose to conclude because now we must go to the activity of the Day of the Defense. We have our military leaders here. I want to welcome the representation of the media, especially we know that you are in a very active day for the Day of the Cuban Press. Tomorrow, I hope you have a great day for the National Day of the Press. And we're going to continue to have this kind of encounter. Also, as we announced here, First Vice Ministers, Marrero, Prime Minister, and our executive members will be broadening information on all these topics daily. There is agenda. We have made a public agenda to go over 15 topics that we can talk about. There are questions about, people are talking about transfers. We have spoken about the transformations and the current situation, the issue of inequality, vulnerability. We'll see you soon, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the Buenos Dias program for giving us this time. Where we're listening to live statements of the Cuban president, updating the people and the international media as well of the current situation, and not only the current situation the country is facing, but also the measures and actions that have been taken to curb the current U.S. energy blockade that is impacting across all infrastructure and sectors of the daily life of Cubans. But as the President Diaz-Canel said, the government will continue, the revolution of Cuba will continue to work tirelessly to fulfill the needs of the Cuban people and to continue to provide services to the most vulnerable and to eventually manage to come out of this moment of crisis with their own efforts and with their own strategy of, how they say, creative innovation. Stay tuned with teleSUR English for more.